Hey everybody, welcome to the show, Board Game Reviews. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to our wonderful tabletop gaming hobby. And this video is part of a video series looking at the game of Evolution Another World. Now, Evolution Another World is a wonderful 4-player game for ages 11 and up, and it plays in about 30 minutes. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to play the game itself. If you want to see a quick overview, see a sample gameplay, or actually see my full review, check out the other videos in the series. I'm also going to have a 5th video where I'm going to teach you how to play the game with a solo, and that's where I'm going to cover the solo AI and actually show you some sample gameplay from the solo. In this video, we're going to teach you how to play the game as a multiplayer game from 2 to 4 players. If that's what you're interested in, come on back after the break. Now, the game of Evolution Another World is a game in the Evolution series of games, and one of the fantastic hallmarks about the Evolution series of games is they are all very, very easy to teach. They break the mechanics down super duper simple. It's basically players are going to take actions in a specific order, and they're basically going to use those actions to go ahead and create creatures, evolve those creatures, and they'll use those creatures to gain energy, or at least in this version of the game, to gain the energy to try to evolve their creatures. The game is going to play out over rounds as players are trying to evolve their creatures. In this version of Evolution, the player who is going to be the first one to create their 3rd transmutation evolution is going to instantly be the winner of the game. Now, before we go ahead and break everything down on how to play the game, it's important to understand exactly what multi-use cards are, because if you're not familiar with the style of gameplay, it may confuse you basically what that means. Multi-use cards basically means is that every single card can be used multiple different ways. In this specific game, which is a multi-use card game, the card backs can represent creatures, and the front of the cards can represent powers that we can evolve the creatures. Do notice that there's multiple different powers in every single one of these cards, and every card is going to have a different set of 2 different powers on it. Depending on how we place the card on our creature is going to determine the evolution every single one of the creatures has. So part of the strategy and part of the tactics of multi-use card games is you're going to agonize on how you want to use your cards. Because if I play my card down as a creature, it's now a creature for the rest of the game. I don't have access to those powers from that specific card. If I play a card as a specific power, I lose access to the other power and I can't use that card as a creature. That's the big concept of multi-use cards, and that's what makes these kind of games so great. Every decision you make matters, and you are going to be trying to get the most strategic tactics based on your evolutions, the evolutions of the players across the table, and the evolutions of, like I said, just trying to get your 3rd transmutation and win the game. Now, if you have any comments, questions, make sure you leave it down in the YouTube comments down below. I will do my best to answer those questions as quickly as I can. You can also feel free to email me off-the-shelf board game reviews. That is ots@bgr@gmail.com. I do my best to answer those questions as quickly as I can. If you enjoy the content, you enjoy the videos I put out there, think about supporting the channel on Patreon. Just tossing $1 tip jar is a phenomenal way to say thank you. This channel is 100% sponsor-free. The wonderful thing, it means that I don't have any sponsors I'm beholden to. I can give you my own opinions, but the negative is that all this comes out of my own pocketbook. You can help keep the channel growing strong just by tossing $1 in the tip jar. But you don't even have to do that. There's another way you can help the channel that's perfectly free. It takes 2 seconds and 2 mouse clicks. Click that like button, click that subscribe button down below, and you can help the YouTube analytics show other people that this is a channel that everybody enjoys and more people want to watch. But that's enough of that. Let's bring everything down to the table, show you how to play Evolution, starting with the setup. At the start of the game, you want to make sure you shuffle the deck of energy source cards. Now, these energy source cards are not quite the multi-use cards like the standard cards that you're going to be playing the game. These cards have very, very standard effect on them. They're going to produce an amount of energy based on the player count, 2, 3, and 4 players. Plus, some of them may produce an additional amount of energy, which is only going to be accessible to any creature controlled by a player that has that specific evolution. For example, this card has an extra 2 source in it that's only going to be available to creatures that have the astral evolution. If a creature does not have the astral evolution, it cannot take that source energy. Only source energy it has is the available energy that's available to all creatures that happen to be out there. It does not matter the evolution. Now, not all cards have a specific source energy available to them. There may be standard cards, which will have no bonus source energy, and they're still going to give an amount of energy cards based on the player count. Again, 2, 3, and 4 players, represented by the little claws on the feet. 2 clawed foot, 3 clawed foot, and a 4 clawed foot. Yes, I think that's kind of cute. At the start of the game, you are simply going to take all these cards, shuffle them up, and you're going to draw the top card of the source, and then you're going to generate the source based on the player count. Since this video, I'm going to show you how to play the game as a 2-player game. That means that we will start with 4 source for a 2-player game that's available to all creatures, and then we will start with a specific 2 source that's only available to creatures that have the astral trait. Now, the important thing to understand here is that the extra based on the specific traits of the creatures does not count the player count at all. So if we're playing a 2-player, 3-player, 4-player count, it does not matter. There's only going to be 2 extra source material for astral creatures. The only amount of source that ever changes is going to be the generic source that's available to all creatures. This will be based on the player count. And again, in this case, 4 for 2 players, 5 for a 3-player, and 6 if we happen to be playing a 4-player game. Now we get to the point where we need to understand a very basic definition for the game. Any energy that happens to be on a source card is source energy only. Any energy that is in the communal pile that's going to be available is going to be called the supply. And we will make sure we place the supply close to our source cards, but understand the supply and the source are different things. Some things are going to refer to the source and some things are going to refer to the supply. When you're looking at the various different power cards available to all the creatures, they're going to use the specific terms of source and supply. Make sure you're paying very good attention to that terminology. And if it tells you take power or energy from the source, it comes off the card. If it tells you to take energy from the supply, it's going to come from the supply itself, never ever affecting the source that's available from the source itself. Next up, you want to make sure you put the sleep tokens within easy reach of all the players. Place the transmutation tokens in easy reach of all the players, and again, players are going to be gaining these transmutation tokens as they play the game. You gain these by taking the transmutation action. If a player transmutes their 3rd creature, they win instantly. I want to make sure I make that very perfectly clear. Once somebody does their 3rd transmutation, that's the end of the game. We're not going to let the other players finish out the round or anything. I know that's common in a lot of card games where other players get to take their actions as well. No, this game is a race. The first person to cause their 3rd transmutation instantly wins the game. Next up, we are going to take our evolution cards. And like I said before, these evolution cards are multi-use cards. The back of these cards is going to represent the various different creatures that we are going to evolve. So if a card happens to be face down like this, this is a creature that happens to be in play. If a card happens to be with its trait card face up like this, this means that the trait is now attached to this creature. This means that this creature now has the power of lulling. If I add another trait to it, it is now a vampiric lulling creature. If I add another trait to the creature, it is now a tiny vampiric lulling creature. And so on, and so on, and so on. The only thing to understand is that no single creature can ever have more than 1 copy of every single trait. So if you add another trait to a creature that already copies a trait that already exists, you're breaking the rules and you're not allowed to do that. Now, every one of these creature cards has a space for 4 energy crystals, and this is where we are going to track to see if a creature is ready to evolve. Now, it does take an action to evolve a creature, but once a creature has 4 evolution source cubes on it, it is ready to be evolved if a player takes that action. It's not instant. Don't think that once you get the 4th cube there, you instantly evolve your creature. You have to take that action. Additionally, there is a trait called the trait of tiny, which allows a creature to evolve once it has its 3rd energy token on it. But again, you have to take the action. It does not occur automatically once you get that extra specific amount of energy tokens on your creature. Take that action and perform the evolution. But we are going to take all of our cards, all of our evolution cards, and we will shuffle the deck of cards. Once the deck of cards is shuffled, we're going to deal out cards to all the players. The first card every single player is going to gain is going to be their in-play starting creature, which they will get face down. Now, a player is always welcome to look at any of their face-down cards that they have for any of their evolutions. No other player at the table is allowed to look at other players' creatures. And let's go ahead and take care of dealing with another term in the game, the term of friendly. All the creatures you control, you as a player, are considered friendly to each other. All the other creatures controlled by the other players are not considered friendly. So if anything refers to a friendly creature, it's referring to all the creatures that you control. Now, once you get the start of the game, you are going to gain 1 friendly creature that's going to be in play. Then after that, every single player is going to gain a hand of exactly 5 cards that'll form their starting hand, which they'll take and place into their hand of available cards that's available from the start of the game. Remember, 1 creature in play, 5 cards in your hand. Players must always let the other players at the table know exactly how many cards are in their hand, but you're never allowed to show another player a specific card that you may have in your hand. You may not be able to go to your buddy next to him and say, hey, if you play that card, I'm going to play this card on you. You're never allowed to show the other players any cards in your hand. but they always must know exactly how many cards are in your hand. If you break this rule, you're going to suffer a mutation. It may be a good mutation, it may be a bad mutation. That's just how evolution works. After every single player has their starting hand of 5 cards and their starting mutation, animal, creature that's going to be in play, we need to figure out who the youngest player is, because youngest player in Evolution Another World always goes first. The game is going to play out over rounds, and every round is broken down into player turns. And on a player's turn, a player is going to take 2 potential optional actions and a 3rd mandatory action, but they must perform these actions in a very specific order. You're not allowed to break this order, and the basic flow of this turn is going to go with players deciding if they want to put a creature into play. If they do, they may place 1 and only 1 player creature into play. Then they may, if they want to, add an evolution to any one of their friendly creatures. Again, remember, respecting that rule that no single creature has multiple copies of the same evolution. After the players decide if they want to add an evolution, then a player must activate one of their creatures and take one of the 4 available actions for their creature. The available actions for their creature that they can take is they may take from the source, if there's any energy left in the source. A player may, with that activated creature, they may put it to sleep if they like. The player may, if it has enough energy on the back of it to perform an evolution, they may evolve the creature itself. Or if the creature has any attacking traits, and all the attacking traits in the game have the orange band on the top of them, they may take an attack action. Now, it's important to understand that a creature must have one of the 3 aggressive orange traits on it, which is going to be the trait of lulling, the trait of vampirism, and then that's going to be the trait of fire breathing. If you have any one of those 3 traits, you may take an attack action. But again, you must activate one of your creatures, and then it must take one of those 4 actions. The 4 actions are taking one from the source, evolving if you have enough transmutation, source energy to do so, attacking another creature, whether it's a friendly creature or not a friendly creature, or putting your creature asleep. Those are the options that you may take. So let's go ahead and break down a player's turn to show you all the different options that a player can do. Starting with the youngest player, who's going to be player number 1, they will have their hand of 5 cards, and they'll have their starting creature already in play. The first thing they may do on their turn, and on player's turn, is they may take any one of the cards they have in their hand, and again, these actions must be done in this very specific order, is they may take any one of the creatures and place it into play. Once a creature is placed into play, it is now considered a friendly creature for that player. Now, anytime I place a creature into play, it is permanently that creature in play for me. I cannot take it back into my hand at a later date. Once it's in play, it is permanently a creature, and I'm going to be working towards evolving the creature. Now, the nice thing about the game is I can always look at any one of my friendly creatures to go ahead and remind me what card I might have put into play, because there are only so many of every single evolution available in the game. There are 16 different evolution powers, and you're free to look at any of your cards that are face down at any time, but you must put them back into play once you've done that. Now, you can only put 1 creature into play on every single one of your turns. You cannot put multiples. You choose 1 creature, put it into play, and it's now a creature that's part of your friendly creatures that you have available to you. Now, the important thing to understand that all the creatures you have in play are considered friendly to you. Just because they're friendly doesn't mean they can't attack each other. So if I get some evolutions that I can manage a chain reaction very, very well, or very smartly, I can actually have one of my friendly creatures attack another friendly creature. Now, attacking friendly creatures or attacking any creatures generally doesn't kill or destroy a creature, but it does allow you to take energy off of creatures, and you use those combinations to go ahead and generate extra energy and allow you to evolve some of your other creatures, potentially by taking the evolution action. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because the next thing we need to look at is the ability to actually add traits to our creatures. Once we decide that we do or do not want to add another creature into play, we may add an evolution to any creature we currently have that's friendly to us. That can be the creature we just added to the board, or one of the creatures we have in play from a prior turn. And we're simply going to look at all the evolutions we have in our hand, pick one of the evolutions that we like, and we will place that evolution into play on that one of our creatures. Once a creature has an evolution, that's a permanent power for that creature, and it's going to have it until it evolves or until that evolution has been stripped away from it, generally by the fire-breathing power. But there may be other combinations that may be available that other creatures can do to make your life a little bit more difficult. and we're going to look at all these possible traits that we can have that can change the way things are going to occur. The important thing that you need to understand is that when you place a trait out, you're only allowed to add one trait per turn. I can't pick multiple traits and go ahead and create one super creature in one single turn. I'm only allowed to add one trait per turn that I have available to myself by taking this action. The other thing to understand is that when you place the traits, you want to place the traits face up in a way that all the creatures can see the powers. You can't be sneaky and go anything like that, because all the other players need to be able to see all the traits available on that specific creature. The nice thing about this, though, is that when we add the traits to creatures, we can always add traits even if a creature is sleeping. Sleeping does not prevent a creature from gaining a trait, but we need to make sure that remember that no single creature can have multiple copies of the same trait. If we ever have a creature with one specific trait on it, we are not allowed to add another copy of the trait, because that breaks the rules of the game. Every single creature is only allowed to have one copy of every single trait available to them, and there are 16 traits available in the game. Now, the important thing to understand here is that the traits that are available in the game will break the rules. All traits override the basic rules of the game, so if a trait says something will occur and that breaks the rule of the game, the trait does take dominance over the rules of the game. Now, there are some nice cards that come with the game that cover the 16 various different traits that are available to all the creatures. I'm not going to take the time to cover all 16 of these traits, because all these traits combo off of each other very, very well. And that's going to make this video way longer than it needs to be, because you can read the source material from the player aids right there that explains exactly how all these traits work very, very easily. It makes perfect sense. Just read those traits, kind of read them from top to bottom. I'll tell you exactly how to take those traits, how they work and how they operate. And don't forget, every single trait has a nice reminder on the top of it that breaks down basically what their trait does, but doesn't cover everything it does. So make sure you're looking at those player aids, because they do a little bit more than exactly what is written on the text of these cards. The final thing to understand about all these traits that we potentially have for all of our creatures is that traits, not only will they break rules, but when multiple traits trigger, the controller of the creature gets to decide in what order the traits are going to go off. And that can allow you to do lots of different combinations. For example, if I have a creature that's fire-breathing, lulling, and vampiric, I get to decide in what order those traits are going to trigger, because that may benefit from other traits that I have on other creatures, so I want to use those combinations as efficiently as possible. Now, there's 4 different styles of traits in the game. You have the orange traits, which are going to be your aggressive traits that allow for the attack action. You have your defensive traits, which are going to be your green traits, which allow you to have protection from other abilities other creatures have. You have your blue traits, which are your energetic traits, which manipulate the energy generation of the game. And then you have your special traits, which are your purple traits, where are going to allow you to do various different things. But the big thing to understand about the purple traits is they are the ones that are going to be mostly breaking the rules of the game. Now that you understand the basic actions, the optional actions of one potentially putting a creature into play, and the next one of playing out one potential trait on one of your creatures, let's go and put out a couple of creatures on the board right now and show you how the actual activation phase works, because the activation phase is mandatory, and it's going to break this down for our player. Let's say we have a 2-player game going on right now with player number 1 over here controlling these 3 creatures right here, and player number 2 controlling these 2 creatures right here. Player 1, player 2. Let's go ahead and break down activation phase. The very first thing you're going to do on your activation phase is you must pick one of your creatures that is not currently asleep, and then you are going to decide to activate that creature. So I could, in this example, either activate my fearsome creature, or I can activate my fire-breathing, lulling, vampiric, metamorphic creature. Whoa, that's kind of a mouthful. The caveat here, though, is that if you happen to be a player that has all of your creatures asleep, you may not take the activation phase on your turn. You may still put out other creatures. You may still put out evolutions on your creatures, but if you get to the point where you go to the activation, you must pick one of your creatures to activate, and all of your creatures are currently asleep, then you may not take the activation, and that's the only time you may skip the activation, and basically your turn is going to be over. Once all the players on the table have all of their creatures asleep, that's when we're going to go to the end of the round. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go back and explain to you how this activation is going to work for the specific player. Player number 1 with their mighty, mighty creature right here. The first option the activated creature may do is they may take an energy from the source. Now, taking energy from the source, you have the community source right here, and you have the specific source that's only available to creatures that have that specific trait. So if we go ahead and look at the creatures we have in play right now, we see that none of the monsters that we have, none of the creatures we have in play right now, have the astral ability. So if I were to take the action on taking one of the energy sources energy right now, the only ones I can take would be one of the 4 from the lower half right now. I cannot take any from the top half. So if I decide that I want to activate this creature, and my activation choice I'm going to decide to do is to take 1 energy from the source, I will simply take 1 of the available energy from the source, place it on my creature, and that is going to be the action for my creature. Do note that taking energy from the source does not put your creature to sleep. That's very, very important to make sure you remember that rule. Now, if gaining any energy from the source allows us to trigger any traits we may have in our creature, such as caring, such as the ability of various different other traits that may trigger when we gain energy from the source, the player who controls that creature may decide in what order they want to trigger all those abilities. Now remember, all those abilities may combo off of each other. That's kind of the strength of the game. You're trying to create these great combinations which allow you to evolve your creatures. And the important thing to understand though is that even if a creature is sleeping, if it has traits that will trigger, it can still trigger its actions on the turn. Just because a creature is sleeping does not mean it's actually out of play. It can still be attacked, it can still gain evolutions, and it can even still trigger some of its traits. The only thing that stops it from doing is performing the actual activation action. That's all sleeping prevents it from doing. And again, don't forget, once all creatures are asleep, that is going to bring about the end of the round. The next action a creature can do is potentially, if it's not asleep for its activation, remember we cannot activate a sleeping creature, so the next action we may do is we can choose to transmute a creature. Now to transmute a creature, it has to have 4 energy on it, and the creature may not be asleep because you cannot activate a sleeping creature. Additionally, the tiny trait allows you to break that rule and allows you to evolve a creature that may only have 3 energy source on it. If you have the tiny creature, you only need 3 energy on it to evolve it. If it's not tiny, it must have all 4 energy crystals on it to perform the evolution. Now when a creature evolves and you decide to take the evolution action, what you will do is you're going to take all the energy that's currently on the creature and remove it from it, and return all of that energy back to the supply, not back to the source. It goes back to the supply itself. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to take the creature and discard the creature and all the traits that may have been on the creature. They're going to go face up into the discard pile. Then you're going to gain a transmutation token. Now remember, if this is a 3rd transmutation token that you gain, you instantly win the game. The final action you can do when you activate one of your creatures is to take the attack action. Now, important thing to understand here is you can take the attack action even if there happens to be energy in the source. Just because there's energy in the source does not mean you have to take energy from the source. You can still take the attack action, and let's go ahead and cover how the attack action works really quick. The first thing you must look at when you decide to take the attack action is the creature must have one of the attacking traits. The attacking traits are fire breathing, the trait of lulling, and the trait of vampiric. The easy way to remember is that these are all orange traits. Now there's a 4th orange trait, which is fearsome, which actually helps the creature do attacks versus others. And to show you exactly how that works, let's go ahead and give this creature the fearsome trait right now, just so you can see exactly what the 4th orange trait happens to be. Again, fire breathing, lulling, vampiric, and fearsome. Remember, fearsome doesn't actually let you attack. What it does is it allows you to combo off of the other traits, the 3 main attacking traits, which are fire breathing, lulling, and vampiric. Now when you declare the attack action, when you've activated your creature, you must go ahead and choose what your target happens to be. Now again, just because creatures are friendly to each other doesn't mean you can't attack your own friendly creatures. Building those combinations might make that a good tactic, depending on what you've built with your specific creatures and their evolutions. Of course, the caveat to that is, though, that you cannot take the attack action if there's not at least one valid target out there on the board. For example, if we happen to have a situation where it looked like this, and our only potential target is flying, and we don't have the flying trait to go ahead and attack it, we can't take the attack action because we have no valid traits or valid creatures or traits that allow us to attack that creature. You must be able to specifically actually make the attack itself. Now, the various different traits can create various different situations. For example, flying creatures can only be attacked by other flying creatures. The astral trait prevents a creature from being attacked unless it's being attacked by another astral creature, and it can only actually attack other astral creatures. Again, the nice player will go ahead and cover all those different things that allow you what situations you can attack. But basically understand, some of the purple things will defend creatures and make them harder, or in some cases, impossible to actually attack. Now, once we figure out if we are able to make an attack because we have at least one attacking trait, we have one possible target for our specific attack. Once we've done so, we may initiate the attack and initiate with our specific target that we're attacking. Now, when we attack, we have 3 potential attacking traits that we may use. And again, as the player with the creature, we always control in what order all of our traits may go off. So in this specific case, we see that I have a fire breathing, a lulling, and a vampiric attacking creature. And let's say I'm going to go ahead and make this the creature that I'm attacking. This is my attacker. This is the target of my attack. If we look right here, we see that this creature is currently fireproof, which says that when this creature is attacked, it does not lose traits. The ability of fire breathing says that when you attack, if you force a creature to lose a trait, you may gain some energy. So how would I do this? Well, I may want to change up the order I'm activating some of these traits because that may allow me to take some various different actions. For example, to show you how this may work in this case, if I decide, since this is my activated creature, I activate Metamorphic and I copy the power of Fearsome, I now use the Fearsome power to suppress a trait of my target, and I'm going to suppress the trait of Fireproof. Now that I suppress the Fireproof trait on this creature, now I can go ahead and activate my attack powers in any order I want. For example, I may just go ahead and start from the top and activate Fire Breathing, which allows me to attack, and this says that if I force a creature to lose a trait, since it's no longer fireproof because I've used Fearsome to suppress this trait, I'm now going to remove that trait from my target, and I'm going to gain 1 energy. Now I may activate the Vampiric power, which allows me to target a creature and force it to lose 1 energy. If I force to lose an energy, then I'm going to gain another one. Since there's no energy on this creature, Vampiric really doesn't do anything at all, so it's not going to go off. So now I may activate my Lulling power, which says if I force the target to fall asleep, I'm going to gain energy. So, since it's not asleep, I will force it to fall asleep, and then I will gain another point of energy. Let's say this creature, before all of this started, actually had a couple energy on it already, and show you exactly how this may have changed just a little bit differently by showing various different things and changes we may have. If we had the situation like this, I could, in this case, use Metamorphic to copy Fearsome. Then I can go ahead and trigger Vampiric, which will allow me to remove this and gain 1. I may then trigger Lulling, put it to sleep, allow me to gain 1 energy, and then use my Fearsome from my Metamorphic power to suppress Fireproof, which will allow Fire Breathing to go off. Fireproof will be removed, and since I removed a trait, I will gain the 4th energy. So using these combinations in a smart order can definitely make a difference in how you're activating all your creatures. The important thing to understand, though, is that you can trigger attacks once per attack trait in any order, but you cannot cause the same trait to go off multiple times. You choose it and you attack, and then the attack is not actually concluded until you decide all of the traits that you want to use. That's the important thing to understand, especially with some of the defensive traits, such as Toxic or some of the other ones. If you manage to get rid of those traits before you finish the entire attack action, those traits are not going to defend or cause any extra problems because you resolve all the attacks. Then, once all the attacks are resolved, then and only then defensive traits will go off. Once we're finished resolving all the attacks, and then any defensive traits that want to be triggered may want to go off, then the attacking creature is going to fall asleep. The final action you can take with your activated creature is if you cannot attack because you don't have the proper traits on it, you cannot evolve because you don't have enough energy to evolve it, then you may go ahead and take the final possible action of the 1 of mandatory actions and go ahead and put your creature to sleep. There's a couple different reasons why you may want to put your creature to sleep. 1, you may want to put it to sleep just to prevent another player from using a lulling power on you. But don't forget, you have to pick one of these 4 actions. And if you're not able to take from the source, because let's say the source happens to be empty of anything that you may have access to, perhaps you may not be able to attack, perhaps you can't transmute, then you're forced to put your creature to sleep. You have no choice, you must do it. But don't forget that just because a creature is asleep doesn't mean it can't be attacked. It doesn't mean that it can't get more evolutions added onto it. The only thing it cannot do is activate anymore. Once all the players' creatures from all the players currently in play have all fallen asleep, that's when the end of round is going to occur. But if there's at least 1 creature left in the game that is not currently asleep, we're still going to continue going around the table. And that allows you to do extra strategies and extra tactics, because if you happen to have cards in your hand, remember, you can still take your cards that you have in your hand, and when it comes to your turn, even if all your creatures are asleep, you may put 1 creature into play, may add a power onto it, and if you do that, you're back in the game and you can start taking actions again. The only thing that stops you from taking any actions with your creatures is if you don't have at least 1 awake creature in play. That's the only time you're going to be skipped. And again, the only time the round comes to an end is when everybody's creatures are 100% asleep. Once the round comes to an end, if there's energy left that's in the bonus source up here because nobody had the correct powers to go ahead and take that extra energy right there, we will discard any extra energy. Then we're going to discard the energy card that happens to be in play, and we're simply going to place it on the bottom of the deck. Next thing we will do is we will draw a new energy card, and we'll fill it up based on the player count and any bonuses that may be on the top. Again, the bonuses are not affected by the player count. Only the energy bonus or only the energy source on the bottom factors in the player count for the game. After that, all the players are going to perform awakenings, where we will remove all the sleep tokens from all the creatures which are currently in play. Then we're going to deal out new cards to all the players based on the amount of creatures they have, with at least one energy token on them. So let's go and add some energy tokens to show you exactly how this will work for all of our players. Every single player always gets a basic amount of 2 cards just for being in play. So you'll get your basic 2 cards from still being in play. Then you will gain 1 extra card for every single creature that has at least 1 energy on them. So in this example, this player right here would gain 4 cards exactly. Even though they have 3 creatures, the 3rd creature does not have any energy on it. And in this example, this player would gain their basic 2 cards, plus 2 more for having 2 creatures with energy on it. Now, if they happen to have a very poor turn, or maybe they did lots of evolutions on the prior turn, they have no creatures with any energy on them, they will simply gain the basic 2 cards that every single player always gets every time that we're setting up for the end of the round. Now, when a player is given a new hand of cards, they can do a mulligan, which means they're going to take their entire hand of cards and they will discard that entire hand of cards. You then will get an entire brand new hand of cards exactly equal to the amount of cards you discarded. You can only mulligan once per round though, so don't think this is something you can abuse. But if you get a bad hand of cards or cards that you don't think you will work with, you do have that option, whether it's at the start of the game or at the end of every single round when you get your new hand of cards. If at any point the entire draw pile is empty, we will shuffle the discard pile to go ahead and form a new draw pile. And then we simply take the first player token and pass it to the next player in clockwise order. Once we do that, that is the end of the round, and we will start a new round. We're starting with a new starting player who will take their hand of cards and will follow the actions as before. The option of may place a creature into play, may add a power onto a creature, and then have to activate one of our creatures. We will keep doing that, going around and around any rounds as we need to, refilling the energy source as we need to, until one player finally gains their 3rd transmutation and instantly wins the game. I hope you enjoyed this video teaching you how to play the game of Evolution Another World. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I'll do my best to get to them as quickly as I can. Also, feel free to email me, off-the-shelf board game reviews. That is ots@bgr@gmail.com. I do my best to answer those questions as quickly as I can. If you enjoy the channel and the content I put out there, think about supporting the channel on Patreon. Just $1 in tip jar is a phenomenal way to say thank you. Channel's 100% sponsor free. Everything you see comes in my own pocketbook, from the equipment and everything I do here. Thanking me by putting $1 in tip jar is a wonderful way to say thank you, but you don't have to do that. Just click that like button, click that subscribe button. 2 seconds and 2 mouse clicks is another way to help those YouTube analytics help keep the channel growing strong. Hope you enjoy this video. Hope you enjoy this video series. And as always, thanks for watching.